Today's guest is an absolute whiz when it comes to the gaming industry. We want to bring Oren Bennett onto the podcast so that he can share his experience when it comes to the gaming space. We'll also dive into his thoughts on Web3 gaming and how Web3 gaming is transforming the entire gaming industry as a whole. This is the Web3 Mission Possible podcast. I'm your host, Felix Cao, and we're very excited to have Oren Bennett with us today. Welcome to the podcast, Oren.
Thank you. Great to be here, Felix.
Awesome. It's awesome to have you here. So it seems that you've always been passionate about games. Let's begin with the question, when did your love for games start?
Uh, I have to say with the Game Boy, when I was growing up,
Hmm.
it was near and dear to me. I was playing, I think, Zelda and Pokemon Blue and Red
All
back
classics.
back in the day, and that's how I got my addiction started.
That is perfect. So that eventually led you down your career path, and that landed you. I know that you had worked at Fun Plus as the business development and also operations manager. So that'd be awesome if you could elaborate on, like your experiences there, and then we'll touch on something that was interesting that happened that I haven't heard happen at any other company is that you actually handled a protest. So I'll let you
Sure.
kind of dive into that and share the details of exactly what happened there.
Sure. So, I started as head of US live game operations and business development at Kings Group, which is one of their 8 or 9 studios. And I was responsible mostly for Guns and Glory, including King of Avalon. And I mean, it was an incredible game, making millions of dollars
Hmm.
per month. And I just played a small part. And one of the interesting experiences I had was with a player protest we had where a group of our Gods of Glory players got together and basically decided to boycott one of the events we held uh, in the game, I think called Kingdom
Hmm.
Conquest. And it was like a weekend event where the game usually made the most revenue because it allowed other players to sort of compete against each other across different servers where usually they're not able to.
Okay.
And they, weren't really happy with how the game was going, some of the updates we did to the game, and decided that they wanted to make some changes and that they weren't happy with some of the changes we made. So they decided to boycott that particular event. It didn't really have such a huge effect actually on the game's revenue, but on the PR side, it was really bad. So my manager asked me to come up with an idea to address it, and I sort of just came up with the strategy myself. Because I'm a gamer myself, I just decided the best course of action was to contact the group. So they had a protest leader, so I reached out to him, told him, I was head of U.S. live game operations for the game, and he was really excited because I soon discovered that the game studio had actually never had a conversation with any of the players.
Now, did you reach
So
out to him in person, or was this online that you
Facebook,
had reached on
Facebook.
Facebook? Okay.
So they're very public in the Facebook group, who the leader was. So, they basically were very open about um, who was involved in their group.
Hmm.
And I just on a whim reached out to him on Facebook just to lend a hand and basically I guess organized the first ever conversation with the Guns of Glory players and our studio. And they were very excited about that. My boss was sort of telling me like, this is something that they've never but done before. So if I can't pull it off, that it's not gonna look well on me. But I went ahead, scheduled this call. They had a list of demands, so they had not just a boycott, but they also had a list of demands.
Are you able to
So
share what some of those demands might have been in order to?
no,
That was
unfortunately.
okay. Yeah, no worries. But it was a list of
Uh,
demands, and then you came in there. You made sure that they were satisfied, right?
Yeah, so before the call, I worked with, one of my operations guys who sat next to me, because I didn't speak Chinese, and all the dev team at FunPlus for Guns of Glory mostly spoke Chinese. So I needed to work with my coworker to basically go through the list of demands and basically address each one of them. So I did that before the call, and then once we had the call, we sort of let them know
Mhm.
like what our answer was for every demand. And then a few days later, we saw some success where I think it was like only 4 days later that the protest leader actually spent hundreds of more dollars in Guns of Glory. So we sort of took that as
That's a
a
good
win.
sign.
And Yeah, it was my first experience with that. We had a lot of success. And I mean, that's sort of what inspired me to pursue Web3 and community-driven games.
That is awesome. Well, yeah, just congratulations on finding a successful solution to that protest. So, especially as dealing out on a first time basis and dealing with the leader of the group itself and making sure that everybody was satisfied with the resolution. And I know a lot of companies, they operate in silos. So here, just being able to reach out and communicate effectively with your community is absolutely important. As you mentioned, it's something that attracted you to Web3 because Web3 is really big on community. So is that one of the reasons when you look at it that how you really got attracted and found opportunity in Web3? So would you mind just sharing your thoughts on that approach?
Sure. So my first experience in Web3 is actually before From Plus. I was
Okay.
overseas expansion manager at a Web3 game publisher called Krypton Foundation. But I sort of lost a lot of hope in the 2018 Bitcoin crash, and that's why
Mm-hmm.
I went to free to play at Fun Plus. But then I was able to, get inspired again and get hopeful again, with my experiences at Fun Plus, because I just wondered, if having such a simple conversation had such a profound effect on players, um, if you could have from the get-go, that sort of framework to have a community-driven ecosystem for players, that it could be really powerful. So when I left Fun Plus, I tried to start my own community-driven game studio.
That is awesome. So is that where you're currently working on right now? Because I know that you have etc. games. So right now, what is it that you're currently working on that you could share?
Sure. So the first one, etc. games, I'm not working on as much anymore. I started with, a vision of doing
Mm-hmm.
community-driven games for real-time strategy on mobile. Right now, actually, I'm involved with my third game studio,
Oh, okay.
and it's still in stealth. But what I can mention is from the Web3 side, it's combining AI gaming and Web3 and making games for sort of underserved audiences like women.
That is awesome. So when you are able to share all the details, we'll make sure to have bring you back on the podcast and we could talk more about it. And actually,
Of
that was
course.
going to lead into my next one of my next questions is actually the role of AI in gaming. So I was looking to actually hold off on that question until later on the podcast,
Oh,
but
go
I
ahead.
think this is an absolutely fitting time to actually bring up this topic. So
No,
right
go
now
ahead. Yeah.
we look at AI and AI is just all over the place, and we see it transforming every single industry. And as you mentioned, you'll be integrating aspects of AI into your
Yeah.
own game.
Yeah.
So right now, like, how do you see AI impacting the world of Web3 games?
Sure. That's a great question. I can definitely talk about it, even though we're kind of in stealth. So,
Even on a general level. So just this in general,
sure.
if you want. But if you're
I can
able to
be,
share, if you're
yeah,
able to share
sure.
some of that as well, then
Sure.
people listening would definitely appreciate it.
And I can be specific too. So,
Okay.
what's really great with Web3, which is really NFTs or
Mm-hmm.
ownership, is that for the first time, players can actually have a voice, right?
Correct.
Um, and have, some kind of ownership in games where previously they didn't. So it's sort of a paradigm shift. And then what AI does, I think it gives players even more of a deeper level of engagement. So I would see Web3 is basically here. So you have free to play here before Web3 in regards to engagement. Engagement is like at the top is like up here.
Hmm.
So you have free to play games, and then Web3 basically increases to a huge new level of engagement. And then with AI, that drives even a deeper level of engagement. So that's how I sort of see them related.
Yeah.
And how we're doing it is through something that's similar to the movie Her, where
Okay.
you have a guy who's using this AI technology earpiece in his ear and he falls in love with it. And in regards to where we're at now with AI technology, um, you have basically these, I want to say, soulless sort of AI bots where there's no human companionship at all, which is basically just the movie Her. And there's really in the movie Her, I believe there was a woman who actually made that bot, and
Hmm.
he was seeking out that woman. Um, where you see right now is all these sort of Web3 or AI bots where there's no human behind the bot. It's just a copy of another human, and that's
Right.
it. And what we're doing is sort of an evolution of that where through AI, we are basically increasing human companionship, where basically players can fall in love with our game characters, and they also have the opportunity to fall in love with the creators that created our game characters.
That is
So
definitely taking a
something,
step up. Yeah, that's so
so
as you
something,
mentioned. Yeah, go ahead,
something,
Oren.
yeah, exactly. So something that you cannot find in any other game. And it's something I think that people are definitely desiring, right? So most people nowadays, when they go on dates, then they don't meet at a
Hmm.
bar. I mean, they don't meet for the first time at a bar. They meet virtually, right?
Yeah.
Most people you meet, um, friends who meet new people. It's through a virtual interaction initially, either some kind of dating app or a social network, and the initial reaction is all virtual. What's really awful about that is because that's your first interaction. It's based upon look. It's very driven towards a certain aspect, like physical aspect.
Hmm.
So you'll get a lot of different interactions versus if you meet someone at a bar for the first time in real life, it's more than just physical attraction. There's other things you can talk about, but an app, that's it. It's just like an icon. It's just a screen, a picture of yourself. And it's just making it really, really awful for people who are single and who are dating, because most of the people on virtual, sometimes they're interacting with bots, right?
Yep.
That's the irony. So through bots, we're actually increasing the amount of human companionship. For example, we can guarantee that any player that messages any of the creators behind our characters, they're messaging a real person. You can't do that on a dating app.
Yeah, that's absolutely awesome. So as you mentioned, like you're just taking Web3, adding the layer of AI, and pretty much is humanizing the entire digital experience.
Right, because
Yeah.
it combines having ownership in the game,
Hmm.
which gives you more opportunities to fall in love with a game.
Yeah. The
And
engagement
then
is a lot
AI,
higher.
and then AI gives you more opportunities to fall in love with the game characters. So basically, you know, I think there's a lot of negativity around AI and especially Web3 these days. I think the most positive thing is that there's going to be games out there like ours that are creating more human companionship.
Yeah, this is taking human companionship and connection to the next level. So it's definitely, I love the whole idea of digital ownership because especially through NFTs, that's certainly a hallmark of Web3 in general, and specifically Web3 gaming, and also now adding to the problem of interacting, let's say, with people like with, let's say, bots and so forth that are not
Exactly.
so humanized, but also now you're developing that layer where they are much more humanized, so that the players or the users on there could actually engage with them on a much more intimate level. So
Exactly. So having opportunities to
mhm,
fall in love with your virtual self,
exactly,
before, being able to fall in love with the real person.
yeah,
Um, I think it's definitely needed because there's a lot of these, like I mentioned, solo spots
hmm,
where people are investing a lot of time where there is going to be no human companionship out of it.
exactly.
Like virtual therapists. I think that's a very popular one now, virtual therapists. But at the end of the day, you really cannot replace a real interaction with a real therapist in
Exactly.
real life.
There's that emotional component to it that seems to be
Right.
missing in the virtual world. And what you're doing is you're taking that and you're combining it with the virtual experience. So that's how we would humanize the entire interaction.
And then how they're all related is, for example, in Got the Glory, we had players who had virtual weddings. So we would
That is
have
really cool.
players that had virtual weddings
Hmm.
because they met in Guns of Glory. So people already, they are already trying to interact with each other, form relationships, regardless of what game they're playing.
Yeah,
So it already happens quite naturally. What we're doing that's different is making it part of the gameplay.
that is fantastic. So yeah, when you release it, I think that's definitely a topic for us to dive into. So that's some very, very exciting stuff. And I love how you're just taking everything to the next level with Web3, and just making the whole level of engagement, a lot more intimate with, with all the people who are involved in it. So that's absolutely fantastic. So if you had
If you want to say it in like a more clever way, you could say it's sort of like owning experiences,
exactly,
right?
there you go,
We had players in Guns of Glory that spent $100,000, $200,000,
big
but they
investments.
but they never owned the experience.
Yeah,
So what's really great with Web3 is AI, not only can you own the experience, after owning the experience, you can then get to this really high level of engagement where, wow, I can actually build real relationships with real people by playing this game. So I can not only own the experience, I can
level up
also
the
have.
experience too.
Right.
Yeah,
I can love build real relationships with the characters that I already have these experiences that I own with. So, for example, you could buy like a virtual person or game,
hmm,
it could be an NFT that someone created. You can say own the IP for that purse, and then say one of the game characters really likes your purse and is like, "Oh, I really love your purse." That starts a conversation, and you find out the creator behind this character that you're falling in love with owns like a purse design store. It's just like really random. They own a
yeah,
purse
it's
design
organic. It
store.
can lead to a lot of organic conversations, interactions, and experiences.
Second life. It's like
Yeah,
second life.
exactly. So that's awesome. So here that since you're building this game, and let's say in Web3 in general, when it comes to the blockchain, if you could just pick one blockchain, or maybe you could pick one blockchain, what blockchain would you specifically build your game on, and on why?
That's a great question. So there's a lot of plus and minuses for a lot of the blockchains that are out there.
Hmm.
Um, for example, Solana is centralized, right?
Right.
Um, so for a game studio like us, it's not really about um, you know, which layer one or layer two does this and does that, because a lot of them, there's just a handful of them that are actually pretty good. Um, it just sort of depends which Web3 stuff will you need the blockchain for. So if you need it to run the game, I would say good luck. But if you're just going to use it, say for the to have on-chain NFTs.
Yeah.
There are some, potential technology innovations that I don't think I'm allowed to discuss, but
Hmm.
Sui has, I think, a lot of great innovations for games in particular. So there's
Okay.
some that are game focused. For example, like Polygon, Sui, and then other than that, it's mainly just relationships. So who do you trust more, right?
Yeah.
So it's less about the innovations, then it's about, well, who's the CEO? Do I know him? Is he really trying to make stuff that is good for games? And other than that, they have grant programs as well. But that's sort of just a side note.
Perfect. Yeah. So it all depends on what you're looking for, and then this fitting your project with the blockchain itself, and then on top of that, your relationships with the people who are behind the blockchain. So,
Right.
mhm,
Exactly. Because, depending on, if you're raising money, then maybe you might want to focus on a chain that has a really great grant program. So it sort of depends on, uh, you know, what you're looking for as a game studio. If you're just looking for something to integrate, then potentially you'll focus on what, technology solutions they have for games. But if you're looking to raise money,
the
maybe
grants
the
are an
grant
option.
programs are more important. So
Exactly. Yeah. So this
depends
is
depends on
more
the situation.
absolutely. So in terms of innovation, um, you said that you're able to speak on some of them and some you can't. But the ones that you can speak on, what are some of the cool innovations that you see that's happening in the Web3 gaming space right now?
Sure. So I think the most interesting one is a ZK rollup that Polygon and Immutable have done together.
Hmm. For those
So
who don't know ZK rollups, would you be able to explain how that?
no,
Okay.
no. So I mean, unfortunately, I can't speak towards that. But they have a new sort of joint program where both Polygon and Immutable have partnered. So I
Hmm.
think that's very rare because a lot of these other chains don't really work with each other.
Right.
So it's sort of the best of both worlds where you can get both Polygon and Immutable. And I think they have their own unique grant program for that
Hmm.
ZK Roll partnership as well. And I mean, I would say the most innovative thing about it is because, like I mentioned, you get both immutable and polygon. So before you always sort of have to choose who you're going to integrate first. But with that, you get basically kill two birds with one stone.
That is awesome. Yeah, this is scalability because Polygon and Immutable or L2s. So that definitely helps, offload a lot of the transactions from the main blockchain just to kind of add a lot of speed to it as well. So that's something that a lot of the what's happening in Web3 in general is, scalability and speed right now seems to be a huge concern. And there's huge factors that everyone's pretty much working on, right? In addition to interoperability and
Sure.
so forth. So yeah, all those innovations that are happening in the space are absolutely exciting because they're the things that happen behind the scenes that allow all the dApps and everything else to be built on top and to work efficiently. So
Yep.
it'll be exciting to see how all this comes together. So that's awesome. So in terms of the challenges, what challenges do you see in gaming on chain today, and what are some of the solutions to those challenges? So if you could pick one that's one major problem with Web3 gaming, like what do you think that is right now?
Regulation.
Regulation? Could you elaborate on that?
So so say you want to sell on-chain NFTs in the App Store.
Hmm.
Um, well, say you want to do that and you want to sell them using your own token. You can't. You have to, the only way currently allowed to sell NFTs on the App Store is through Apple Pay.
Got it.
So what does that mean? Well, I think the whole point, I think one of the biggest points people want to sell NFTs is because potentially, depending on royalties, you can get like 100%, right? But if you want to sell NFTs in the App Store, you only get 70%.
Right. They take 30%.
So I think most Web3 game studios you talk to these days do not want to sell their NFT through Apple Pay.
It's simply because of the revenue split at the moment.
Yes, exactly. So I would say regulation is probably the biggest concern right now, and the way people are doing workarounds mostly is selling NFTs through a website. Because through Apple's policies, you can actually send an email to all your players,
Hmm.
telling them to, if they go to your website, you get like a 20% discount or something,
Right.
and you can buy NFTs through the website. You just can't add that messaging in the app itself, but you can send an email to them about it.
That is awesome. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of listeners right now, especially that have are working with NFTs, and that's something that will be very insightful and useful. So we definitely you appreciate you sharing that, Oren, with
No
our
worries.
audience there. So that's awesome. There's one thing that you and I had spoke to earlier was the whole conundrum about transparency versus anonymous versus due diligence, and we see a lot of that in the Web3 world. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the whole idea of transparency, but yet there's a lot of anonymous teams out there. Why do you think that's so?
Well, I would say during the bull market that happened more often,
Mm-hmm.
and because a lot of investors wanted in. So there was a lot of demand for Web3 deals. And in order for them to participate in these Web3 deals, um, they were, sacrificing a lot of the due diligence that they would normally do. And the reason why is because they're willing to take more risk if they potentially were able to participate in a lot of these really attractive deals. So, for example, I think there's an understanding that at one point, uh, Sam Bankman-Friedman of FTX told Sequoia that if Sequoia wanted to do any due diligence, he's not
Mm-hmm.
going to take Sequoia's money. So there's a
Wow.
lot of power play happening, I think, during the bull market. I think a lot of that is starting to change now because it's not a bull market anymore.
So there's a lot of
Some
FOMO
investors,
then. That's what you're
yeah, a
saying.
lot of
Yeah.
FOMO. So because of a lot of the FOMO, investors, I wouldn't say were sloppy, but didn't do a lot of the regular due diligence that they usually do because they were afraid they would miss out on a lot of these really hot deals. Um, so you have, some companies that, uh, you know, were bunch of financing teams doing a game that raised like 50 million, $100 million
Mm-hmm.
dollars, where that money went nowhere. Um, and it's basically what ended up happening is like a lot of investors got burned. They invested in deal they if they did any due diligence in, they would have never invested in.
Yeah. So that's
Uh,
the amazing thing in terms of like a bull market. Like it can make the most seasoned people in the field forget to do the basics, simply so that it's the opportunities there to get involved in something that has an extremely high ROI. And
yeah,
yeah, just being able to kind of step back every once in a while and do the due diligence would be such a huge asset, so that it could prevent any type of mishaps that could have been avoided.
sure.
So
Yeah, and I mean, what's great now is that the bull market is over, so a lot of investors that got burned are licking their wounds
mhm.
and hopefully have learned their lesson. And when they are investing now in the current market, if they are investing at all, they're definitely going to do more due diligence and hopefully don't make the same mistakes that they made during the last bull market if there's another bull market that comes.
Now, do you see the same thing happening in the next bull market, where you'll see a lot of the same behaviors again? Or do you think the people that had invested in the last bull market had learned a lot of the lessons, and then they'll re-enter the next one? So then the next bull market there'll be a lot of due diligence being done. What is your perspective on that, or will it be just a repeat of what happened last time?
My gut is telling me because investors only make their money back with one or two deals,
Mm-hmm.
that they don't have a choice. So maybe they learned the lesson in regards of what to look out for, but if they're willing to take more risk and do without due diligence if there's another bull market for say a hot deal,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure they would make the same decision because
This is a race for time.
yeah, because it's a race for time, and because only one or two deals, makes it back for all their investments, they're going to be under the same pressure again to participate in a lot of these deals that maybe they don't have enough time to do due diligence for. So I think the lesson learned will be more of like they'll be more aware of what to look out for, but in
Mm-hmm.
regards to having that same pattern happen again where they don't do the due diligence, I think will definitely happen again because as an investor, like I mentioned, they're going to be under a lot of pressure to participate in a lot of these hot deals again if there's another bull market.
That's very interesting. So I guess we'll see when the next bull market hits whether the same thing repeats itself.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Exactly. So let's we have a fair amount of listeners who come from the Web2 world and they're either transitioning into Web3 or they're part of Web3. So let's focus on that movement. So in terms of that particular scope, what are some of the big challenges that people in Web2 face when entering the Web3 space? And what advice would you give them on how to best navigate these transitional waters? So, for example, we could look at what's the difference between, let's say, marketing in the Web 2 space versus Web 3, community building, and also, some of adopting some of the ideologies of Web 3, such as decentralization. So I would love to hear your thoughts on, some of those challenges for the people that from the Web 2 space that they need to be aware of so they could circumvent a lot of those challenges and make that transition a lot smoother into the Web 3 space.
Sure. So on the marketing side, most of the challenges present itself when it comes to the audiences.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean is still mostly Web3 audiences are middle-aged men.
So are you looking
So
like 35 and under, or like how would you define middle-aged men in this particular case?
I'll say like 35 and under.
Okay.
And so, you know, a lot of challenges, different challenges would present itself, obviously, if you're making a game for women, right? And you want to target Web3 audiences, it's probably not going to work. So I guess you would probably want to focus on particular games that would be more male focused. Um, and
Why would this just to quickly jump in? Why wouldn't it work with, let's say, with females at the moment? Is it because there's not enough females part of it, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, because most of the Web3 audience are males, not
Okay.
females. And so I mean, speaking to our game studio in particular, the reason why we're not worried about that is because we're not doing play to earn. But and then we're also really not particularly doing NFTs. We're more doing like a Web 2.5 where it's like a free to
It's
play
like a
game.
kind of like a hybrid between the two.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So for people who are looking to move from Web 2 to Web 3 and not Web 2.5, on the marketing side, if you want to somehow cater to non-male audiences, or say, not just males 35 and under, you would have to basically get rid of all the terminology. So most of the Web3 terminology has a very negative connotation when it comes to sort of the marketing side of things. So I
Can you give
think
an example of? Can you
so
give an example?
most people now are calling NFTs collectibles.
Right. The digital collectibles, exactly.
Digital collectibles. So that's one example. But yeah, basically, you want to avoid using Web3 terminology if you want to move over from Web2. And then, like I mentioned, you want to do a male-focused game,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't want to do a game for kids. So that would actually probably be nearly impossible.
Yeah, so we're just
Um,
waiting for pretty much the shift in terms of the user base to come into Web3. And right now you're transitioning because obviously Web2 has, all demographics. But as you
yeah,
mentioned with Web3, it's usually predominantly male 35 and under.
yep.
So until, we have more of kind of like a homogenous demographic, then the types of games will begin to evolve to be more applicable to both males and females and all players of all ages.
Exactly. So I would say that's the biggest challenge on the marketing side is which audience you're marketing to, uh, the challenges that come with marketing towards that audience and what terminology you're going to use.
Perfect. That is awesome. And also, what are your thoughts on? Because I know that you had worked with YGG before, which is a guild. So that was something that didn't really exist in Web 2, but you're starting to see that a lot more in Web 3. So how do what are your thoughts on how guilds impact the entire Web 3 gaming industry?
That's a great question. So I worked with YGG Southeast Asia before,
Hmm.
because some of the Web3 stuff I used to do was play to earn.
Right.
And game guilds, especially YGG, had their initial success from yield farming. They would
Hmm.
have what they call scholarship programs where they give sort of free grants for players to basically just yield farm, and then they get a percentage of that yield farming. Once Play to Earn died, most of these guilds, not YGG, but a lot of these other guilds, just went away
Hmm.
because they couldn't make money with the scholarship programs anymore. I think YGG Southeast Asia and YGG is still doing the scholarship program, but it's not making as much money as it used to be making. Um, where I see guilds playing a major role in Web3 gaming today is more as sort of a community partner.
That's interesting. Could you elaborate on that with the community partner idea?
Sure, so sort of like a cross promotion. So for exchange for them sending you players, you give them revenue share, or you do a co-marketing.
Oh, that's
Um,
interesting.
so I don't really see it as such a strong revenue driver as the yield farming was, but it's sort of something that they're forced to do out of survival.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, when you had free to play games, you didn't really have these businesses or side businesses that had their own sort of game communities unless you had your own social network. So a
Right.
lot of these game guilds that used to be very heavily reliant on the scholarship programs have had to sort of pivot into sort of being their own like game discovery platform or identity platform like cars or some other type of technology business that could be useful to a game studio.
That is excellent. Yeah, because a guild really just connects, there's players that have, let's say, they're pretty much just renting their digital assets
Right.
to the, let's say the people who are entering the scholarship, and then
Yeah.
together they would share the revenue three ways, right? Between you have the people who actually own the digital assets and the characters, and then they lend it out to or rent it out to the players, and then also you have the guild that would get their share of the revenues as well. It seems like what can happen is since they already have a tight knit of all different types of users, and as you mentioned, one of their functions could be to be referring users to other games and so forth. They could actually form some sort of a social network where they could build that community and then also have the referral program to send users to different games and so forth. So
Sure.
that'd be
Sort of
the
like a
evolution.
game club.
Exactly. So that would be a good way to describe it. It'll be very interesting to see how everything evolves with guilds and their role moving forward in the Web3 gaming space. But if we circle back, in terms of the Web2, with there's a lot of incumbents in Web2 looking to enter into the Web3 space. So how do you
Yeah,
see these Web2 incumbents entering Web3?
that's a great question. I think Ubisoft just announced the second Web3 game,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is going to be like, I think people are saying it's going to be a AAA game. Um, the public opinion is in order for them to do Web3 games, they have to sort of really get players to trust them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot of issues people are mentioning that could happen with the new Ubisoft Web3 game, where a lot of AAA players might not be able to trust Ubisoft with like a Web3 version. Even though Ubisoft has done AAA games for quite some time. Um, so I mean that's a good question.
Do you think it's possible? Because usually when you have incumbents from another industry come in, how they enter the field is they do it through acquisitions. So do
Sure.
you see a lot of these Web2 incumbents entering the space, and that could be one way where they're able to leverage the trust gained by, let's say, another established company within the Web3 space already, and then from there on, they're able to enter in the space through that particular portal. What are your thoughts on seeing that type of action happening in the near future with the Web2 incumbents entering the Web3 space?
Great question. I wouldn't see a lot of acquisitions because there haven't been any independent Web3 games that have done well
Mm-hmm.
or particularly well. Um, so most of the Web2 incumbents, like I would say Jam City, ended up forming their own Web3 studios.
Oh, that's interesting. So they're just
So
looking to come in
Gems,
almost independently.
yeah. And I mean, I would say their success, I mean, it's nothing different than free to play. Their success hinges on how good the game is.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it would need to not be play to earn, and it would hinge on uh how the free to play game economy is. So what a lot of these play to earn Web3 game studios had messed up previously is that they had an open economy, and an open economy is great for players, but it's not great for the game studio because you can take any virtual items out of the game
Mm-hmm.
instantly, and that just destroys the game economy. Imagine if any of these players like Guns of Glory that spent $100,000, we just let them take their virtual items out of the game.
Right.
It would destroy the game economy. Um, and because since there's such a small percentage of players who actually spend money, um, so you really need to have a really great closed economy first, or in tandem or in parallel with an open economy. And you can't have the open economy interfere too much with the closed economy. So a lot of these Web2 comments, I think they'll have success if they can figure out how to build an open economy in parallel with a closed economy without having the open economy uh basically
Extract
destroy
extract all
yeah
the value
distract
out of it.
extract too much value out of the closed economy. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So it'd be a nice hybrid
Yeah.
between an open and a closed economy. That's something that's going to be, something to keep an eye out as the Web2 incumbents and just Web2 in general enters into the Web3 space. There'll be quite a convergence of the two over the next while here. Let's switch gears here for a second and jump to the whole topic of Web3 adoption. So, in terms of the what in your eyes can be done to boost the mass adoption of Web3, more specifically, let's say blockchain games.
Great question. um I would say this the simple answer is more funding to game content.
Just to make higher quality games? Is that
Yeah. So
okay?
unfortunately, over the past couple of years, Even during the bull market, most of the capital has gone to layer ones, layer twos.
Hmm. So you want to see more investment into the actual games itself.
Right. And then even recently, most of the capital has been put into single or a handful of game studios.
Hmm. Would you like to see that more
Uh,
obviously spread out?
right. So in order to have more game content, you need to make more
Gaming
bets.
studios. Yeah.
Right. Rather than just having a handful of bets
Right.
congregate or get attracted to these handful of game studios. Um and I think that will eventually need to happen, but right now with these current market conditions is not going to happen.
Yeah, so that's something that will eventually happen, even though right now the conditions are less than ideal. But essentially, what we need is more injection of capital so that we get more gaming studios, so that we could actually have a bigger selection of games and contributors to the gaming ecosystem. And
Right.
adding to that, what are your thoughts on increased security? Because there's been instances in the past where you have all these big studios that actually have been compromised, and because of that, a lot of funds, and some of them are 100 million plus, that have been extracted from them. So one thing is security, and personally, that's what I understand as well. Do you see that as well in terms of improving the security with in the Web3 space?
Good question. So I think there's a lot of really great Web3 audit firms out there. Certec is
Like
one of
Surtech,
them.
yeah.
Um, just use them. So there's a lot of game studios that don't use them, and I mean, as long as you use them, I mean, just like in Web 2,
Hmm.
having a trusted audit partner is important. If you don't have a trusted audit partner, then you open yourself up to risk. Some startups can't afford trusted audit partner, right? So it
Hmm.
depends how much you raise. If someone raises $100 million and they never had a trusted audit partner, that's on them, right?
Right.
Um, I think you'll see most Web2 firms, that are public companies, right,
Hmm.
have at least two to three trusted audit
Just
partners.
to run
So I
through all
think,
the code and make sure that everything
right.
looks protected and secure.
Well, I don't know about the code, but the finances, right?
Hmm.
Um, so same on the Web3 stuff. So not just sort of the code itself, but also the financials behind it as well. So I think you'll see as the Web3 market matures, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, if you raise $100 million, investors are going to be asking you who you're using as your trusted audit partner.
Yeah,
Where maybe during the bull market,
those things
it
get
wasn't
overlooked.
something, right?
Yeah, but they get overlooked. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
certainly going to come
I'm
up.
sure if you raise like 50 to $100 million now in this market, VCs would want you have to have a trusted Web3 audit partner,
Exactly. Yeah, and that could be
right?
on the accounting side, like what you said with their financials, and then obviously
Right,
the code with Surtech, for example.
right. So these Web3 audit partners don't just audit your code; they're sort of a one-stop shop, right?
Yeah, to make sure that all the T's are crossed off.
Exactly.
Perfect. So before we close things off here, are there any special announcement that you want to share exclusively with our audience?
Um, nope, not right now.
I think your stealth
Just
will be when you have your stealth ready. We got to talk again and then have you back on this podcast.
exactly. So once I have a game to announce, I think that will
That's a
be something
special
special.
announcement. I think
Yeah,
yeah,
that'd
that'll
be
be
something special.
perfect. I think everybody
Yeah,
will be definitely excited to learn more about it. And
yeah.
then lastly, where can people go to learn more about you and everything that you're working on?
Sure. You can go to orenbennett.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Oren
Awesome.
Bennett, uh, through my NFT icon, which is one of the littles. I have that cute littles NFT icon with the
Perfect.
pink hair. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can email me, obennet1@gmail.com. And yeah, I'm also on Twitter as well.
Awesome. So what we'll do is we'll link all your socials in the notes below here. So, make sure to contact Oren. He's a whiz when it comes to the gaming space.
Thanks, Felix.
Awesome. So today we talked about a lot of interesting things when it comes to gaming and Web3. Thank you, Oren, for sharing your insightful thoughts with us today. You've been an awesome guest, and we can't wait to have you to see what type of impact you're going to have in the Web3 space. We look forward to having you join us on another podcast episode in the future.
Okay, thank you, Felix. Pleasure.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure having you on.